First off, I just want to introduce myself. I am Justin Taylor. I'm the founder of Wow College Essay. I'm a college essay expert and admissions coach. And writing is my life. It is what I do when I'm helping students write. It's what I do in my own free time. So let's go ahead and jump into a little bit of I introduced myself already. What is today's agenda? So there's a few things we're all going to be jumping into. But the first is, what are the lessons from last year? So there are a few things I want to point out about how the admissions landscape is kind of becoming evolving. There are a few differences that are emerging, especially since COVID, that I want to cover before we get into the essay and stories from my last season. Then I want to jump into who admissions officers are and how do they think, what are they looking for in their reading applications. Then we'll go into what I call a Wow College essay, which is an essay that lingers in the mind of the reader and really communicates you and shows how you have the character that matches the school. We're going to look at two kinds of essays, two essay structures that are really successful that I've seen help many students get into all the big schools that you might have heard of: Columbia, U Penn, NYU, UCLA, Yale, you name it. My students are there. And then we're going to brainstorm together your first draft. We're actually going to get started working on finding a topic. And then after that, there'll be some time for your questions. So first, some good news. There are a lot of colleges in the United States. A lot of people have a lot of anxiety about this process, which is understandable. There are many, many options. Now, some of us may be thinking, well, yes, that's true. And there's only a few of those schools that I'm interested in, and they're very competitive. And that's true. Most applicants only go for the top. Like it says here, about a third of all applicants apply to the same 20% of all colleges. And only about 100, this says 80, it's more like 100 now, colleges have an admission rate below 20. The average admission rate is 66%. The key thing here is to balance your list and evaluate fit, which I'm going to be talking about. And of course, the challenge, as we mentioned, is that everyone's aiming for the selective schools. So what's happening in the past 3 years, this may not be terribly new to most of us, but there's a few changes coming up. So between 2020 and the pandemic and today, there's actually been fewer people applying to college. It has to do with the way school has gone for a lot of students who don't feel like high school has prepared them to go to college. They're not interested in college. This is mostly in the lower tier type of schools, the public systems, the state schools. So there has been a bit of a decrease in the number of applicants. But there has been a surge in the number of applications. So a decrease in applicants, but an increase in applications. And it's almost all at this top tier, whereas everywhere else has seen a drop. So the SUNYs, even well-known private schools like Fordham, have seen a drop. The schools that are less brand name, less on the map. Most everybody is aiming for schools that are really well-known, big names in their favorite subjects and in their favorite industries. And new in 2022, last year, this is the one thing I want to share with you, is that location, the city the school is in, is one of the biggest criteria. And I really want to encourage you to think about this for your application process. So the big cities, New York, LA, Boston, to some extent New Orleans, have all seen a huge surge in the number of applications at these schools. The highest number of applications have gone to UCLA and then NYU. And then the next down is UC Berkeley. So San Francisco Bay Area, hugely popular, of course, for Silicon Valley, the tech industry. And then after that, it is Boston University. So because Boston's also a really popular location. And there is some sense to this. A lot of students who are choosing location, it's because they can find jobs in those locations that they can then take with them and work remote elsewhere. And there's a big trend in this movement. Even if you don't even go to a school in a big city, you might end up in one of these big cities I named for work if you are in certain industries. And then after you get that job, you then take it to a more of an emerging city like an Austin or Miami or Seattle. So for those of us who are looking to find schools that may be less competitive because of location, maybe look in those emerging cities as an opportunity to get a more comfortable acceptance rate on your list. Not saying that you should, but just a little tip from me to you. More about balancing the list, just so you have this. Most everybody packs the list at the top, and I really want to advise you to stop doing that if that's you, and to really think about the mid-tier schools. They should be more like the bulk of your list. I like to think of a sandwich. You know, a sandwich is usually not mostly bread. It's got a lot on the inside, and I feel like the list ought to be like that, a little bit more like 10 to 20%, as it says here, for those reach schools, and then the middle is the bulk of your list. We call this, the public Ivies. So University of Michigan, the UC system, some of the SUNYs, the UNC Chapel Hill. These are considered the very well-respected public schools. And then mid-tier privates like a Colgate or a Fordham or a Boston College, and to some extent BU. And then under that, you want to think about what could be likely for you, and has to have a few of those there, possibly a state school, or maybe a more less selective school like a Bard, not Bard. I'm blanking on the name. That's all right. So that's a part of it. And then thinking about fit as well. So like I said, location, the size of the school, what is the alumni network like, all of these things. All right, so my little primer, just so we're on the same page about the admissions landscape. And the reason I share all of that is because the role of the essay is really, really key in some of those more selective schools. And I want to talk about how admissions officers in those very selective schools think, and the role the essay has in their process. So this is a quote from a guy who runs admissions at Cornell. Well, he did. He actually left this place. So he says, "One year I had a student with near perfect SAT scores and straight A's. I originally put him in the submitted pile, but then we had to reduce the list. I reread his essays, and frankly, they were just a little more boring than the other kids, so I cut him. Boring was the only justification that I needed, and he was out." So what's the takeaway from David here? You can have statistically everything going perfectly in your transcript, in your test scores, and they look at who you are as a person in the essays, and they don't click with you. This guy, David, says, "I found this one applicant boring, and that was the only reason I needed to give him the axe." And in these very selective schools, they are looking for reasons to eliminate. It is really a very big process of elimination, because they have very few spots and way too many applications. So we're here to craft essays that do not give them that reason to say no, but instead gives them many reasons to say yes. And we're going to get into that. One more quote from this woman. So she was an officer at Yale, where I went, and also at MIT. And she sums it up very well, I think. Some 70% of kids who apply here are qualified to come to school here. So 70% are qualified just on their transcripts and their test scores and their extracurriculars. So all of that, they're qualified to go to the school. We can be as choosy as we like. She said to me once, we could go into the rejection pile 3 or 4 more times and create a freshman class that is just as wonderful as the one we admitted. That's how competitive it can be at these places. So then she said something very interesting. It almost all comes down to whether or not you're a likable person. An admissions officer is really asking herself, would I like to hang out with this guy or gal for the next 4 years? Would I like to hang out with this guy or gal for the next 4 years? Not how brilliant is this person? How talented is this person? How much will they become an important alumni? I mean, somewhat that actually, but more, how do I click with this person? Can I see this person? Can I imagine being in a relationship or a friendship, or not a relationship, but having a cool conversation with them? This is maybe news to us who are watching this, that is really what a college is thinking about. And I want to give some nuance to this idea, but it's pretty important. And the essays do a lot to create that experience of you, to communicate to the admissions officer your character and whether or not you can be someone they want to hang out with. So this graph is a simplistic way of reducing all of this down to some numbers for you. At the top tier, character determines entry. Like Helen was saying, when the academics are equal, when everyone is qualified, it's really the character side of the application that is determining whether we say yes or no. So this is very true at these top tier, very selective schools that have an admission rate that's below like 25%. All of that's very true. So what can we do about that today? There's, of course, the essays, your activities, your resumes, your rec letters from your teachers also help create this picture of your character. So I'm not going to talk about those elements. We're just going to talk about how the essay can do it. The essay is a pillar of your application. It is like the keystone in like an arch that holds up the whole structure of it. And I use this acronym WOW to help communicate how that happens and how your character can be dimensional and clear to the reader. And I thought it was so successful, I went ahead and named my business after it, Well College Essay, so I believe in it. So the first W has to do with identifying your want. So a question I often ask is, what would you stay up until 4 a.m. to learn or do? Or what would you wake up at 4 a.m. to learn or do? It could be academic, it could not be, as long as it's authentic to you. So this is one way to get an essay started, to just make a list of these things. The reason I say that is because one of the key things schools are looking for is enthusiasm for learning. There is a key component to success at college, which is called autonomous learning. So autonomous learning means I am self-motivated. I am motivated from within, intrinsically, to go and learn, to get out of bed and make success out of my day in this container, in this college container. I'm going to use the school to pursue what I really want to learn. And you know, hey, that could change, by the way, over the course of your academic career. And admissions officers aren't necessarily looking for a rock solid commitment, actually, to an academic choice. They're looking for this drive to learn, this desire and hunger to learn. And that's important because you're applying to be a student. And that's what students do. They have the job of learning. So when that is communicated in the essay, you're doing a lot to earn a lot of points in the yes column. And again, it doesn't have to be an academic desire that you articulate in an essay. It doesn't even have to be a specific passion that you articulate in an essay. And I'll get into that in a second. You don't have to talk about passion. A lot of times students get intimidated by the passion question because they think, well, I don't really know yet what my passion is. And that is totally cool, y'all. That is totally cool if that's you. If you don't know what your passion in life is right now, that's great. There's a lot of schools that don't need to know that, and in fact want students who are hungry to discover what that could be in college. Lots of schools. This idea that we have to be specialists now and many experts is fairly true at the very, very top selective schools, like the Ivies, but most schools are not needing that. And I can say more about that when we get into a certain essay structure that's very good for students that are in that position. The next has to do with telling an original story. So narrative is number one when it comes to the college essay, because narrative is what makes the essay memorable. If you take away anything from this webinar, narrative is what makes your essay memorable. And the second thing would be voice. And to me, your voice comes out, your original voice comes out when you tell an original story. An original story is a story that is authentic to you, that is from your life. So you could go to that list you made of authentic things you love to learn or do, and see if there are any unique original stories from that list. Excuse me. And make a list of those stories. Maybe one of those could be a great topic for your application. And then you could also consider if there's a strong enough story that you might want to be telling across all of your statements. So some students have a strong enough personal identity or personal story that you want to be talking about it from different angles, from different essays, because there's more than the main essay in your application. Many schools have what's called supplemental essays, where they're asking you more targeted, specific questions about you or your interests or your plans for college. And we're not going to cover the supplements in this webinar, but just so you know, this exercise that we're going into today is a very good way to nourish and generate material for all of the elements of your essay. So this thing we're going to start at the end of this hour is good for many of the application elements. And I'll go into detail there when we get there. The last element of a strong essay, the W, the last W of the wow, is wisdom. So it's very important that your essay also communicate your thinking. What are you learning in this story you're telling? What are your reflections about what happens? Make a list of these little nuggets of knowledge, little pearls of learning, and then weave those through your essay. And I'm going to go into detail about how to do this in this webinar. I'm not just giving you little easy pieces of advice right now. We're going to open up all these ideas. When we are telling a story, but we're also giving some analysis about it and some reflection about it, essentially answering the question, so what? We are showing that we think. We're showing that we have a mind that is curious, that is trying to make bigger connections. And that is exactly what we do in a college classroom or in any pursuit as a student, any pursuit of learning. So schools are really looking for that quality in anyone applying. The desire to learn and a curiosity that is intellectual, that is reflective. So let's keep going. Let's keep looking at how to do all of this. The first thing is an essay type that I call the challenge essay. And we're going to look at two types today. There are many essay structures that one could employ. These are two that I found very successful in the process and fairly easy to learn by most student writers. So the first one has to do with a story where you're facing a challenge and maybe overcoming it. Another way of calling this story is a hero's journey, which is an important journey in which a hero learns something and they change. That's essentially a hero's journey. And most stories are hero's journeys. Most movies are made about a hero going on a journey of learning and changing by the end. So these are excellent essays for showing your character. So a story where you're facing a big challenge shows resourcefulness, grit, thoughtfulness, maybe even empathy, and that desire to overcome, to grow enough to be able to meet the challenge. That is gold when it comes to college admissions. Those kinds of character traits really matter at a lot of the competitive schools. And especially in a post-pandemic world where there's, a need for students to be mature enough to pivot and adapt to a changing world, a world that's changing pretty rapidly. There's a real strong desire to meet the students that are mature enough to do that adapting. So this is a really strong essay for students that want to communicate that character, that are already strong storytellers. You don't have to be a strong writer per se to do this essay well, but if you already like telling stories to people, telling jokes, this might be a strong fit for you. This is also a really good essay structure or type for students that are very clear about what you want to do in college, because you can use this structure to tell a story about a challenge you faced pursuing your favorite subject. That's a really strong way to go, especially if you are competing against a lot of students that are aiming for a very similar subject in school, like a STEM subject or business. These are very, very common, very popular. And so to stand out in that sea of students in that lane, tell the story of overcoming a big challenge that you faced while pursuing what you love to learn. I also like to offer this structure to students that are less experienced writers, and that is absolutely okay if that's you. Many students are coming to this exercise not having a lot of exposure to the process of writing a personal essay. So if that's you, do not feel wrong. It's very common. So this is a very good fit for students that are looking for a way to write something strong with the skills that they have. So this is an example of a challenge essay. I'm not going to read this whole thing. I'm just going to read a little bit of it so you can kind of get a feel for how this might sound. So let's see this. This is by a guy named Tadeo Messenger. My friends and peers don't understand my relationship with Big Betsy. This is mainly due to the fact that Big Betsy is far older and louder. Is far older and louder and larger than what is considered, quote, normal at my school. She is constantly surrounded by others who serve the same exact purpose, but are more elegant. Big Betsy was always different. Every time I went out with her, I could feel judgmental eyes, wondering why a kid like me would even want anything to do with her. Despite this, I was always proud of her and what we accomplished together. She was made fun of relentlessly, but I always knew deep down that we had something special together. It was like we had known each other for years when I first laid eyes on her. All right, so that's all I want to say here about, or read today about from that essay, just to get a flavor. Essentially, he's telling the story of his relationship with his truck. And it's a story in which he's facing the challenge of fitting in at school. He's struggling with how he's perceived because of the kind of car that he drives. Anybody who lives in a high school or goes to a high school where car culture is really big. I went to a high school like that, and your car's not the prettiest and the fanciest. You know, when you're in high school, that can feel like a blow, or you can take that personally, right? So he does a really great job in this essay of explaining his challenge in a fun and creative way with this twist where you learn that Big Betsy is a car, and how he comes to find confidence again and stick with his truck that he really likes. And he also shares stories of how he and his truck are in business together. He uses his truck for hauling. He creates a hauling business. It also shows his maturity and his independence and grit. And if you want to read this whole essay, I'm going to share a link to it in the email that you'll get after this webinar is over. And for those of you who have seen any reminder emails about this webinar, that link is in there as well. So let's talk about this essay. So the passion in the essay is his truck, and the challenge is fitting in. So you can see how passion and challenge go together in this structure. The student has a passion, and they have a challenge they meet pursuing that passion. And then this has 4 parts. So these 4 parts are the 4 parts of a hero's journey. The status quo, where you meet the hero in a balanced world. Then a challenge comes along and knocks the world out of balance. Then the hero goes through a trial and error period, trying to rebalance the world. And then a new world is created. So in Tadeo's essay, the status is he loves his truck. They accomplish a lot together. The challenge is that his peers make fun of her, and Tadeo feels shy and insecure and self-conscious about it. He needs to get stronger at school, build his confidence. He goes through trial and error, building confidence by running that hauling business and fixing up his car until he no longer desires the approval of his classmates. He is confident enough in himself and what he's doing with Betsy. It's like, you know what? I don't need this. And pretty soon, Betsy becomes a kind of school celebrity or a school mascot. And Tadeo starts to take on leadership positions in his school. So those are the elements broken down. Now let's talk about how you can do this. So the first thing, of course, is to identify a passion. And we talked about that a little bit ago. Make a list of stories in which you struggled to pursue a passion. Then you want to break it into those 4 parts. You might even call them 4 images. So the status quo, life before the challenge came along. And then the challenge arrives and forces you to change. So again, with Tadeo, there was feeling shy with his truck, people making fun of him. Then he goes through those those trial and errors to grow his confidence. So in your story, you're trying different things to meet this challenge, to get to the place where you can succeed against this challenge. And then a new you is born, or a new world is made, the great person that the schools are considering. It's very important with a challenge essay that who you are at the end is very clear. I want to make a sort of linger on this idea for a second, because sometimes students want to use a challenge that is very, very, very big. And that's totally natural to want to do, especially when we're younger. When a big challenge comes along, it can have a huge impact on us, on you and your growth. And the issue I have found over and over again with this essay type is that students spend a lot of time describing the challenge, articulating the challenge, and very little time articulating this last part, which is the new you or the new world. So definitely pay attention to how much attention or word count you're giving to these three stages of the story. This is in particular for, like I said earlier, very, very big challenges. Some might call them tragedies. So the loss of a loved one, or another kind of very big personal challenge, a big financial loss. These are very real events in our lives. And if we're going to go ahead and embrace them, and I'll talk about topics that are a little like, maybe red zone, it's very important to talk about what you did to get strong, to get to a good place, and to describe you in that good place, maybe for like half of the essay, so that the school really knows you are strong and that challenge has not brought your capacities down. This is also something to consider to do for those of us who've had a major challenge in the course of high school that has affected our grades. And we need to communicate to schools how we got through it, why there might be this one semester or year in my transcript that doesn't look as strong. So you could use the challenge essay to articulate that, but just make sure that at least half the length of your essay is spent talking about who you are now, the thriving person that was created because of the challenge. All right. Oh yes, and the last thing you want to do when you're getting to the last W element of the essay, the wisdom piece, is identify a theme to the growth that you go through. So for Tadeo, it was confidence. That was the theme. And he spends a lot of his essay talking about analyzing confidence and what builds confidence. So I recommend that you name a theme to the growth that you experience in your challenge story, and then weave those questions, insights, observations inspired by that theme. You do all of that, you are in a really great shape. You have an essay that I would say is like in the top 20% of strong essays. All right, so let's talk about the next style of essay. Let me just do a quick time check. All right, we're doing good. This is called a patchwork essay. These use what's called an associative structure. So rather than telling a story, you are using associations or riffs on a favorite place, object, or ritual. And these associations move the essay forward. You could use you use this central place or object or ritual as a quote framing device or topic of discussion to which you return to again and again as you riff. A very, very strong coherent theme runs through everything. This is really good for students who want to show their capacity for thinking, especially interdisciplinary and undeclared applicants. So this is what I was talking about earlier when it came to the passion piece. So there are students, plenty of students that have many passions or want to use college to explore and discover what they really love. And these essays, this essay structure or style is very good for students that want to do that in college, or any student that wants to show a great capacity for thinking. This essay is really intended for stronger writers. I would say if you consider yourself to be a less experienced writer and writing in a personal essay style is not so familiar to you, this structure might be more of a challenge than you want. And so I would go ahead and look for a challenge story and build your essay around that. Nothing wrong at all with it. So a patchwork essay doesn't use narrative as much. But it does use very strong literary elements like imagery and scene and voice in the same way a narrative piece does. So it's not very essay-like in terms of like academic essay. So let's look at an example very briefly. This is a very famous essay called the Costco essay by Brittany Stinson. This essay got this woman into every single Ivy League school, plus Stanford, and I think MIT. And she did so because she really used her capacity to make associations, and of all places, Costco. So I'm going to read this first paragraph just so you get the idea. Managing to break free from my mother's grasp, I charged. With arms flailing and chubby legs fluttering beneath me, I was the ferocious 2-year-old rampaging through Costco on a Saturday morning. My mother's eyes widened in horror as I jettisoned my churro. The cinnamon sugar rocket gracefully sliced its way through the air while I continued my spree. I sprinted through the aisles, looking up in awe at the massive bulk products that towered over me. Overcome with wonder, I wanted to touch and taste, to stick my hand into industrial-sized freezers, to explore every crevice. I was a conquistador, but rather than searching the land for El Dorado, I scoured aisles for free samples. Before inevitably being whisked away into a shopping cart, I scaled a mountain of plush toys and surveyed the expanse that lay before me, the kingdom of Costco. So she goes on to describe her visits to Costco through her life. So she uses Costco as a framing device, and in her visits to Costco through her childhood up to today. And she really starts to riff on her deep thinking in Costco. In this first paragraph on the second page, you see some of it. When enjoying an obligatory hot dog, I did not find myself thinking about its all-beef goodness that Costco boasted. Instead, I considered finitudes and infinitudes, unimagined uses for tubs of sour cream, the projectile motion of said tub when launched from an 80-foot shelf, or maybe when pushed from a speedy cart by a scrawny 17-year-old. And she goes on and on like this. And of course, the wit and humor of the voice is another great element of this essay. So, oh, there's something missing there. That's all right. So the unifying element is, of course, shopping at Costco and her many trips from childhood to today. The main theme of this essay is really like the main character of the essay. Like in a challenge essay, it's how do I overcome the challenge? With an associative essay or a patchwork essay, it's really more about the theme is like the main character. And for Brittany, it's her intense desire to know, or just her insatiable curiosity. So you can remember from those little excerpts we read, she has all this curiosity going through her all the time when she's in Costco. She wants to explore it up and down. And as a mature high schooler, she's thinking about things like the velocity of a tub falling from the top of a freezer case or something, and other fun elements. So she, of course, uses lots of associations. She falls in love with questioning, is what is one of the big discoveries that she has at Costco. And she questions things like physics, the velocity of carts, to history. She mentions the hickory smoked ham in Costco. I think makes her think of the President Andrew Jackson, whose nickname was Old Hickory. I promise you it was funny to me when I read it. Maybe it's so nerdy to you that you want to like turn off this whole webinar now, but it did get her into every Ivy League school. So how can you start doing this process yourself? First thing is make a list of objects, places, and rituals that you love, and all your little stories about it. Then pick one story as a framing device, or if not, you could pick like many stories that you can associate to as you contemplate this place, object, or ritual. And then you come back to it again and again and again as you discuss the theme. So most important, you identify a theme and your relationship with that place or object or ritual. So it's your relationship to that place, object, or ritual that has the theme in it. So for her, it was Costco is all about discovering, exploring, being curious. Make a list of questions, insights, observations on that theme, and then weave them through your essay every time you associate to a different story inside of the frame, inside of the topic, or element of that topic. You also bring in questions, insights from your list. And then you go back to the framing story. I am zooming through all of this very quickly, so I apologize if this is a little over your head. It is a very powerful essay structure, though, if you embrace it well, like Brittany did. So we've looked at this before. So now let's talk about starting your college essay. And there's an exercise that I give out to all of my students and all of my clients. I call it the WOW College Essay Starter. Essentially, it's a list of top 10s. So the first one is familiar. What's your top 10 things you would get out of bed at 4 a.m. to do, or stay up till 4 a.m. to do? And this could truly be anything. What do you nerd out about? What could you talk about forever? Just build a list. Keep building a list. What's most important about this list is describing why you are obsessed with this. So if you said Costco, like Brittany did, you then want to say, because I'm obsessed with Costco, because when I'm there, my curiosity is on all 4 cylinders going. That's how you want to fill this thing out. And there are 4 of these lists in this process. So your 4 favorite passion, your top 10 passions, sorry, not 4. Then there's your top 10 rituals or routines. So what do you do on a daily basis or a weekly or monthly that you routinely do, or that you are a ritual that you do? It could be a ritual to relax or connect to yourself. It could be a ritual to focus. It could be a ritual to connect to others. Make a list of those 10. And again, why? Why do you do these things? Then there's the top 10 favorite places or objects. Again, why is this place or object your favorite? So answer that. And then for challenges, top 10 people or situations that really challenged you in your life. I know there's a typo. There should not be a second list of places or objects. If you like, get started on doing this list right now as I move forward with the rest of the content. It's really important to not dilly-dally on this topic, on this essay. So if you want to use this time in this webinar to get going, take it now. I don't mind. You could start with your top 10 favorite things to do or learn or talk about or perform or study. So your passions. Next, I want to just go through quickly on zeroing in on a topic. So you want to choose topics that are odd, that are weird, that would linger in the mind of somebody else who's learning about you. So let's say, oh, one of my passions is business. That is not going to linger in the mind of anybody. But you could say one of my passions is building a business that helps the deaf experience live performance and trains all kinds of hearing people to interpret live performance and bridge the deaf and hearing divide. Okay, that's really specific. That to me would be a really great topic for a college essay. It's not just I love business. It's like I want to grow a business or build business to serve this need that's really specific and niche. That's a part of my life. That's one way to go. But again, what's weird or quote nerdy, these things linger a lot in the minds of readers. I like to say that colleges don't admit people who fit in. They admit people who stand out. And they also don't admit people who, maybe succeeded in high school for other reasons than academics or nerding out on favorite topics. People who are super popular, but, aren't great students. That schools really do admit great students and people that aren't afraid to be passionate about something. So I highly recommend digging into yourself and finding your inner nerd and helping it come out in this process. It's definitely rewarded in the college admissions process. There's a few topics that are kind of red zone generally that I encourage students to not look into, at least at first. So death, divorce, depression, the 3 Ds. I also want to include the big game. So whether that's athletics or like chess, the big tournament, or the big, DECA presentation or speech and debate, championship, these tend to be pretty common. Death, divorce, and depression, maybe not as common, but because these challenges are so life-changing, students tend to have less of an ability to talk about them in a mature way. And that's the reason I encourage students to not, look at topics about this. Mental health journeys are very real. And so I'm not saying they're not worthy of giving a great piece of writing to. And I have helped students write mental health journey essays that did very well, but it takes a lot of nuance to do it. And like I said, any kind of major tragedy should be about who you are now and who you've become because of it. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about your topic. Other things that are also red flags are service trips and vacations. They tend to signal I'm a student with a lot of means who doesn't go out and pursue my own challenges. Instead, I just do what is given to me by like my church or my community, the volunteer group that I'm in, or the vacations my parents organize. None of that really signals an autonomous learner, independent, strong character. You should probably get support for choosing the topic. I recommend collaborating with a trained coach like me, or your college counselor at school, or your English teacher. Their discernment is really key here. So after you fill out those lists, come to somebody who can really support your process in the choosing of the topic, especially someone who understands the college admissions process. I actually don't recommend using the Common App prompts that the Common App supplies. I think that they are good for helping you fill in the lists, the top 10 lists, but I do not think they should be the way you get started writing. I don't think they spur the writing process very well. At the end of the day, discovering passion, the challenge essay or the patchwork essay, great way to go to get a good structure going. So I just want to show some fun stuff now before we get to questions. A lot of applicants that I work with come to me like this. They feel like they are in the sea of the bachelors on the bachelorette, and the college is like the bachelorette who's going to hand out the rose to one person and everyone else doesn't get in. And I want you to think about it differently. When we do this essay process, and we really communicate our character and who we are, We want to feel like this, that we are the one with the rose to hand out to the schools, that we are this great person with these great talents, with this great brain, this great mind, this great curiosity and drive, and that the school would be the lucky one to get us. And so we are the one showing them who we are, how great we are, and that they would be lucky to choose us. That attitude is a surefire sign that your essay's in great shape. Briefly, the steps to completing the essay. You got to do an outline before you do your first draft. And I do recommend getting support for that. So an adult, a college counselor, an English teacher, or someone like me who's a professional in this space. Then you do the first draft based on that outline. And every time you're writing the next draft, you want to be asking yourself, how can I make this clearer? How can I create moments that linger in the mind? How can I do more storytelling craft, narrative craft, to create a sense of scene that immerses the reader? And then how can I weave in more of those moments of reflection where my thinking is being shared? And at every draft, ask those questions to get closer and closer to your final draft. When you get to the trimming of your essay to get down to word count, I highly recommend bringing in an adult who is experienced with writing. I find that most high school students don't have a whole lot of skills with this. If your essay is enormous and you haven't been following word count much in your process, which is fine, I think that's a fine way to go, actually, to only save polishing and trimming for the end. It's how I work with my students. And you want to get word count down, you might try using AI to do the first word trim. Do not use an AI to write your essay or to edit your essay. Only use it to give you a few ideas and to maybe give you some ideas on how to trim. AI, just quick warning, will totally destroy the voice of an essay, make it sound completely banal, and ruin anybody's chances with a college. So it has to be a personal essay by you. Do not use AI to write your essay, but you could maybe use it to get an idea of how to cut it down. The final check, do share your final essay after you've polished it down to word count with somebody who has never read it. Preferably, again, an adult who knows English and the college admissions process, knows writing. So your essay, your English teacher, your college counselor. And then at the very, very end, go back to the Common App and assign a prompt. And if you don't find one that totally fits, you can always use prompt 8, which is create your own prompt and let your essay be a response to that. Do get started now. It is important to use the summer to use this so that by the time you're in your senior year and your plate is full, you don't have to deal with the big lift of this essay, because it does take some time and some effort. So I really recommend getting started. Very briefly, a few tidbits about what I do. If you want to use my essay starter, it's totally free. It's on my website. I also offer a free 30-minute consultation on your topic. If you'd like that, just email me, and I'll be sharing my email on the next slide. So anybody watching this, you get a free consultation with me. I also have one-on-one essay coaching packages that I do with families and students. It could be just this main essay that you want to work on. If you want help with all your essays for a school or all your essays for all your schools, if you're a really ambitious applicant, I do have packages for all of that. I can also just do a one-off application review and in between. So I do a lot of different kinds of things with people. My services definitely bring the stress way down for you, the student, and your parents, so that I can be the expert adult in the room. If you want to sign up with me, I have a 10% off promo I'm doing until June 22nd. So for anybody attending this webinar or watching the video later, you can get 10% off an unlimited package with me, which is an unlimited number of essays for a school or a set number of schools. And that deal is good for about a week. All right, so now questions. Do I have anything happening in the Q&A? Not yet. If you'd like to ask a question, go ahead and throw it into the chat or the Q&A. I'm happy to field any questions about your topics you're thinking about, or your process in general. If you want to get a hold of me instead and email me your questions, you can do so at my email on the screen, justin@wildcollegesa.com. Or if you want, you can text me. I'm happy to actually get a text thread going with you if you'd like to do that. So you go ahead and text me at that number. So some students often ask me questions about things like, do you recommend writing about social justice? So that's a really hot topic in college essay land right now since George Floyd. And my advice on social justice is only talk about it if it truly is a passion for you and it's been a part of your life in high school the whole time. It is really important not to signal values you think will be popular because they're polemic, meaning they're on the minds of people. So I really want to dissuade from value signaling, getting to social justice stuff because it might be popular. Only do it because it's truly a passion of yours. This is especially true, I think, when it comes to students that are dealing with racial hardship. That is absolutely an important story to tell if that's part of your story. I just want to caution students around telling racial hardship stories as like the only thing you talk about in your essay, because it can kind of cage your story or the idea of you in a little bit. And what you want is to help the admissions officers see you fully and see your character as a student fully. And so again, it takes some nuance when it comes to talking about racial hardship. So that's one topic I find often comes up in my chats with people. And other questions that students like to bring up a lot are how to write an essay when I don't feel like I'm a really strong writer, and I filled out this essay starter, but I don't really find a whole lot of like unique stories or original things about me. How can I get more of that out? One thing I have found is we are often our worst critics. We are often the worst judge of ourselves. Maybe get the help of somebody else who knows you well. So often students who I find are in that position, I have them fill it out with a really good friend who knows you really well, or a relative, maybe a cousin or even a parent. I do want to voice some caution around involving parents in this process. Parents obviously are involved in the college admissions process. You have a stake in your child's choice and their process, and you want them to succeed, of course. However, I find that parents make not the best collaborators when it comes to the essay process. So maybe don't go students to your parents to get help filling out your college essay starter or writing your essay. However, if there's another adult in your life, maybe an uncle or an aunt or a teacher that you are friends with or that you feel really knows you well, ask them some questions about you. Like, hey, what would you say are like my favorite topics or passions? Or what would you say are like the big challenges I faced in my life? And see if that can inspire some answers to the college essay starter. All right, well, those are the questions I think for now. If you do want to, please email me at justin@wowcollegeessay.com or text me at that number you see on the screen, 929-244-9719. It's been a real treat to share all of this content with you. I would love to meet you. So if you have a topic that you're thinking about, or you filled out my essay starter, go ahead and reach out to me. I'm happy to schedule a free 30-minute chat and give you my feedback on it. And if not, I wish you all the best with your essays and your prospects with college. So yeah, please have a wonderful evening, and I hope we get to meet. All right, everybody, take care.